Welcome to the Voice of Reason with yours truly, Robert McNeily. This show will be all about you, the American people, politics, punchlines, and a dash of that Western charm and that divine providence that has blessed us for nearly 250 years. It will be a mix of politics, of culture, music, and sports, really everything that not only President Trump loves, but what you love, the American people, bringing you subject matter experts on a whole host of a variety of topics. Thank you for watching The Voice of Reason with Robert McNeily, right here on the right side of history at RSBN. Oh, for the longest time, whoa, for the longest, if you said goodbye to me tonight, there would still be music left to write. What else would I do? I'm so inspired by you. That hasn't happened for the longest time. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. Nothing like starting out the show with a little bit of Billy Joel to put a smile on your face. And again, Thursday night, so it's the Voice of Reason. The history, Mr. Director. Did you know about all of the government shutdowns that have happened in the past? Well, here's a brief history of U.S. government shutdowns according to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Now, the United States government October 1st because lawmakers could not pass funding law for the fiscal year 2020. Kept operating when appropriations had expired, known as the funding gap, if you've heard that term in the past. Now, the agencies minimized all non-essential operations and obligations, believing Congress did not intend for agencies to close down. Some of the activities that agencies would refrain from during this period were hiring, grant making, and non-emergency travel. So the 1970s appropriation legislation started getting tied to continuous policy issues such as abortion and school integration. So that caused 6 funding gaps in fiscal years 1977 to 1980, or in the bulk of Jimmy Carter's presidency, which ranged in duration from 8 to 17 days. Now, in 1980, reacting to those increasingly frequent funding gaps, the president asked the United States Attorney General at the time, Benjamin Civiletti, to provide an opinion on how to interpret funding gaps in the context of the Anti-Deficiency Act. Now, the Anti-Deficiency Act prohibits agencies from obligating or expending federal funds before an appropriation is enacted or above the amount specified in the law. Now, the Attorney General, Mr. Civiletti, issued two opinions about the interpretation of the Anti-Deficiency Act in 1980 and 1981, which shifted the norm from government agencies operating with limited capacity. The opinions state that federal agencies may not spend money when there are no appropriations, with a few practical exceptions. One exception is for spending money to close agencies in an orderly way. Another exception is to allow spending when there is a connection between the agency's functioning and the safety of human life or the protection of property. Now, there have been 15 funding gaps since the Civiletti opinions, including the government shutdown that we most recently saw starting on October 1st, 2025. Now, since many of those funding gaps occurred for a brief period of time or over a weekend, there was not widespread government disruption. 4 of these funding gaps, however, lasted 4 or more business days and broadly impacted government operations. The longest of those 4 shutdowns lasted 34 full days from December 22nd, 2018 to January 24th of 2019. The most recent funding gap is ongoing and getting pretty near because of this Thursday, October 23rd. We are at the 23-day mark. Now, do government shutdowns happen in other countries? Government shutdowns do not occur in peer countries because their governments do not react in a lapse in funding bills by shutting down operations. Instead, they implement shorter-term solutions, such as continuing to operate the government at the amount budgeted the year before, or longer-term solutions such as holding elections so new governments can pass the annual budget. In Germany, a federal parliamentary republic, delays in passing the annual budget are typical in election years. Now, that does not stop the government from operating in its entirety, but Germany's law states that if the legislature does not enact a budget before the start of the legislative term and that fiscal year, funding continues at the previous year's amount to maintain institutions, meet obligations, and continue construction projects, benefits, and services. So in other cases, that revenue and reserves cannot cover the costs. The government can borrow 25% of the previous year's budget. Well, what does that lead to? Inflation as a result. Some systems slightly different than ours. Now, South Korea utilizes a presidential system, much like the constitutional Republican government we have here in the United States. And like the United States, responds to delayed annual budgets similarly to that of Germany. Now, South Korea's legislature is late in enacting a budget. A provisional budget conforming to the budget of the previous year goes into effect and will be able to maintain and manage institutions established by law until the new budget is ultimately enacted. Now, the United Kingdom, a parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy, has a different reaction to an inability to pass a budget. Failure to pass a budget can instigate a vote of no confidence, and there is an election for a new prime minister. Now, it becomes the new government's job to pass funding legislation. In some countries, they allow time to process to play out, such as Germany and South Korea, as mentioned prior. Now, as other countries identify the inability to pass a budget as a structural problem with the current government, like in the United Kingdom, what those countries can do is share in the understanding that the governments must not shut down because of the legislature's impasse. So ultimately, to conclude with that very long analysis, is that government shutdowns are expensive for the government, interrupt federal services, and disrupt the federal workforce. Rather than engaging in short-term budget brinksmanship, policymakers should work on bipartisan solutions to put the United States on a long-term, sustainable fiscal path. And I mean, really, you could blame both parties at times. This is solely in the hands of Senator Chuck Schumer, who is afraid of his far-left base and AOC primarying him. I feel like a broken record as Speaker Mike Johnson feels the same every day, giving updates on this Democrat shutdown. Tonight on The Voice of Reason, we'll ask a local mayor how that might just be affecting his town, including a trip to Israel last year that was unlike any other prior to this recent peace deal between the United States, Israel, Gaza, and the world coming together to look forward after years and generations of violence in the region. Could we have peace in the Middle East? It sure looks like it with President Trump's leadership. All of that tonight on The Voice of Reason. Welcome to The Voice of Reason. Mayor Rusty Paul running for re-election in the November 4th election is just around the corner. He's from Sandy Springs, Georgia, a slice of Americana. Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming on the show. Please share with us your trip to Israel last year. We've seen so much of it in the news. You joined a group of bipartisan mayors to go observe specifically northern Israel and what took place there. And I was deeply moved by what most media outlets did not report here stateside, what it was going on to the state of Israel in such a dark time.
Right. It was a group of 13 mayors that traveled to Israel under the auspices of Combat Anti-Semitism movement. And you said northern Israel. They wouldn't let us go up there. I have a lot of friends. We have a sister city relationship in the north, Akko, and a cluster of other communities, Kfar Fadem and Malat Tarshiha. And they said it was too dangerous. Hezbollah was still roaming. But we did go down to Kibbutz Be'eri and the Novo concert ground. We went to, and we met with survivors. We met with victims. We met with a lot of families who were hurting. This was this was June of last year, about 8 months after October 7th. And it was, just to see the brutality that was inflicted on the people of southern Israel during the Hamas attacks and hear the stories. We heard, for example, one of the nurses at one of the kibbutz was calling her parents, knowing that she was about to die, to tell them goodbye. Now, I don't speak any Hebrew, but you didn't have to speak Hebrew to understand the terror that she was going through. And in that recording, you could hear the gunshots that killed her. And then you talk to family members who did survive but lost family members. Talk to a survivor of the Novo concert who ran for 4 hours nonstop. She said the first hour they didn't realize they were running toward Gaza. When they realized that, they had to turn around and run back 3 more hours just to reach safety. And people would say, "Come hide with us." And they said, "No, we're going to keep running." And all those people that said, "Come hide with us," were slaughtered. And so hearing those stories and seeing, you go into people's houses and the walls were pockmarked with bullet holes and grenade fragments. They just threw grenades into rooms where people were and talking to the family members of those folks who were killed. You understood the brutality of groups like Hamas and their just lack of human compassion for anybody or anything.
It's absolutely tragic, and we're very grateful for the leadership of the United States and Israel to have come together, brought the world together last week, and we'll see how this stands with the vice president there in southern Israel right now to see the U.S. command in conjunction with the UK and Canada to not only help with the rebuilding of Gaza, but to bring peace to the entire region. Sandy Springs has a large Jewish population. How did these attacks really affect people locally as you stood in solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters and friends, not only across the world, but right there in Israel?
We had, right after October 7th, I was approached by some leaders in the Jewish community. We have a 1,000-seat theater here in Sandy Springs, and they asked if we could host a rally in support of Israel and in acknowledgement of the tragedy that had happened in Israel, particularly southern Israel. And we said, of course, we held that just a few days after the October 7th event. We have a 1,000-seat theater. We have a 450-seat theater. We have an outdoor green that will hold about 4,000 people. We filled all those up. And we had, and then we streamed it. By the time we counted all the streaming and the people who were there physically, we had over 13,000 participate, which was very moving. And clearly the emotions of that night were still very raw. And a lot of people were still in shock. They just could not believe that something like this could happen in Israel. So it was a very emotional evening. But I think there was a certain catharsis that occurred that night that allowed some of the healing to begin. We were able to talk. I was able to talk for about 5 minutes and gave some remarks. And in the course of that, I just put a line in there that I didn't think the speech was that spectacular, but I said, as a line that was there, I said, Israel has to do what Israel has to do. And the audience just erupted. They were waiting for somebody to say, look, this is not tolerable. And particularly somebody like me who's not Jewish, to say that Israel has the right to defend itself and to make sure that something like this never happens again. And it touched a real chord. People for months were telling me how moving my speech was. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it was that great a speech, but it did touch a chord. And I was gratified by the reaction and also by the whole community coming together. It wasn't just the Jewish community who came together. It was the whole ecumenical community coming together to show solidarity with our Jewish friends here and also in Israel.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think it's the one piece I have to disagree with you on. I thought you did an amazing job that night. I was there for that speech, and it shows that genuine nature of leadership, especially at the municipal level, of neighbors serving neighbors. And tell us more about Sandy Springs, especially right now, dealing with the second longest government shutdown in the modern era. It might become the longest. How does that affect an area like Sandy Springs, just north of Atlanta? And it's a slice of Americana from suburban living that really blends into that urban living right north of Atlanta, but was once Atlanta, Georgia. So please give us a history of Sandy Springs and why it's really home for all.
Well, Atlanta is one of Sandy Springs' nicer suburbs. And so we're part of the metropolitan Atlanta area. We're the second or third largest. We compete with another city to the south about whether the second or third largest city in metro area. We're a new city. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary. The state of Georgia had not created any new cities since 1959 when we were incorporated in 2005. And in that period, the population of the state of Georgia had more than tripled, in fact, almost quadrupled during that period. Atlanta had grown, and trying to provide government services to, was a very challenging task. And all of the areas around Metro Atlanta particularly were underserved as a result of the lack of a governmental structure designed to provide local governmental services. So we were the first. And we proved that we could run a very tight, efficient government. We capped our tax rates. We have a cap on our property taxes. We set the millage rate, and it has never been raised. In fact, the council and the mayor can't raise the millage rate. It takes a referendum. We also have a floating homestead, so that when your value of your home goes up, we roll that tax back so that if you have, say, like this year, many of our houses had 10, 15, 20% assessment increases. In the old days, your taxes would go up 10, 15, 20%. What we've done is we have a floating homestead that rolls that back to either the CPI, Consumer Price Index, or 3%, whichever's lower. So that our tax base simply doesn't grow any faster than the overall rate of inflation. And in fact, if inflation is higher than normal, we don't even keep up with inflation. And we've been able to maintain our services and keep our taxes low, run a very efficient government. And so as a result, we're a very desirable community because we do have a very modest tax burden, and we live within our means.
There are no faint hearts in Sandy Springs, Georgia, to borrow a line from the late, great John Fitzgerald Kennedy as he addressed Fort Worth, Texas in the 1960s. And we see that there as I've moved in since January of 22, and I've been grateful for the way the community has somewhat embraced my simply being there and vice versa. There's always these smiling faces, hardworking people with neighbors who have their doors open. And I remember, too, especially in that time of COVID or coming off of that, and even everything surrounding BLM protests and even some riots and what happened in Atlanta, really the Sandy Springs Police Department on the front lines of saying, look, if you're going to break the law, we're going to keep this community safe and we're going to serve the fellow people. And I think it has a lot to do with the entire ethos of the community.
Well, it's interesting when we have people, and we occasionally have to arrest people, even though we're a very safe community, and they find out that they've wandered into the Sandy Springs to do their nefarious deeds. They say, "Oh, I thought I was in Atlanta. I thought it was somewhere else. I didn't realize it was in Sandy Springs," because they know here they're going to jail if they're doing things that they shouldn't be and breaking the law. So we have developed a reputation, and in fact, with cities across the country being short of police officers, Sandy, as a result of our reputation and the fact that our community loves our police department. I mean, they treat them so well that we are the only police department I know of with a waiting list of officers from around the country who want to come to Sandy Springs and join our force. When every city around us and cities across America have huge shortages of police officers, we have an abundance. And it's because I tell everybody there's a local restaurant not too far from City Hall called J. Christopher's. I say it's the safest place in America in the morning because our police officers are in there having breakfast. And yes, the food's good, but one of the reasons is somebody's going to pick up the tab while they're in there. During COVID, we had a 3-week waiting list of people who wanted to cater lunch to the whole police department. And when you treat your officers well, they're willing to risk their lives for us. They don't want to pay that price, but they're willing to go in. And they want to be well paid. Yes, they want to be well trained. Yes, they want to be well equipped. But more importantly, they want to know that the people they're protecting appreciate it. And when we have new recruits coming in, we put them in cars, we drive them around. And in people's yards all over town, we have signs that residents have voluntarily put up. It says, we support the Sandy Springs Police Department. When they ask what kind of community support we have, they come back saying, yep, this is the kind of place where I want to work. So it's made a huge difference for us. That's why we're one of the safest cities in America.
And Mr. Mayor, being a safe city in America, I'd like to know what you're most proud of in your tenure. You've been around the block, a Georgia state senator, running the Georgia GOP at one point, serving in the Bush 41 administration, and now mayor of Sandy Springs, Georgia. What is the highlight as you look towards this reelection effort come November 4th?
Well, Sandy Springs is a lot like most suburban areas. We were auto-centric. A lot of strip shopping centers, roads. This was a farming community up till the 1960s, and we just simply paved over the farm roads that were designed for 200 or 300 trips a day, and now they're having to handle 25,000 trips a day. So it was very auto-centric, and we had no place. We had no downtown. So when I was elected mayor, we started what is called City Springs. It's a district in the central part of the city where we have the government operations clearly, but we talked about the Performing Arts Center and the theater and the green. We built that as a place where we could come together and do what I call building the connective tissue of community. We had to have a place where we could come together and form that sense of community, that community pride, allowing neighbors to get to know neighbors. It's a very large geographic area, about 37 square miles. And a lot of people didn't know, they didn't even know their neighbors, much less people who were a couple of miles away. So we built a place where we could come together as community, and we have the theater. We have our local theater company, which is phenomenal. We have Friday night concerts on the green. We have a lot of different events going on that bring our community together and really create that sense of community pride, of belonging to a community, and as I say, building the connective tissue of community. And it's really transformed our community. It's made it closer. It's made it a lot more cohesive. And there's real pride in being a Sandy Springer. When we started, our border is along the Buckhead area of Atlanta. And a lot of those people there they didn't want to lose that identity of being in Buckhead. Well, 20 years later, people in Buckhead want to be part of Sandy Springs. So we've changed the dynamic. And so, people are really proud of being part of this community.
Yes, and I can echo that with friends I have made since I moved in January of 22 who have really become more than friends. They're like family to me, and I think it's really a credit to that community ethos that you find there, especially that professional theater with Broadway veterans and some local Georgians and Atlanta natives who have come to share in those great arts traditions that is now Sandy Springs. So very worth your time to see these great shows, especially on a beautiful summer evening or even a fall evening right there on the green.
Right.
Now, tell us, Mr. Mayor, what sets you apart from your opponents come this next election in roughly a week and a half?
Well, I would say knowledge, connections, and the ability to. I give you a perfect example. When we had a truck knock down one of our major east-west corridors, within 2 hours, I was on the phone talking to the DOT commissioner, and we had a plan in place within just a matter of hours, a couple of days, to get that bridge restored, and we were able to accelerate that. I was just able to, working with the Atlanta Regional Commission, Atlanta with the Beltline is becoming a trail network city, the whole region. Was able to work with and get some resources to help us fill some gaps in that. It's knowing how the system works, knowing who to call, having the knowledge of being mayor for several years now, as well as you referenced my life at the federal, state, and local level. I know how all these things come together, and I know how to work within that system to accomplish things for our community that make the quality of life better. It's not about going out and just getting more money. It's getting cooperation. It's about building networks. For example, before we became a city, the argument was that these new cities would create a balkanized environment where nothing would ever get done regionally. And I argued that these new cities were going to be like Lego blocks. You can put them together and detach them and put together localized service delivery that makes sense for a region that may not make sense for the entire Atlanta region. So we've been able to do that and prove that these cities really do. And the mayors get together and we figure out, well, here's some things we need to be working on together, whether it's transit, whether it's our police radio, whether it's 911 services. We've been able to make a huge improvement in those basic local services because the mayors are working together. I know how. I'm on the board of directors of the Municipal Association. I'm president of the Metro Atlanta Mayors Association. Having all those connections and relationships really help us get things done on not just within the city of Sandy Springs, but our life doesn't end at our borders. We need to be able to cooperate regionally, and the mayors have been able to do that. That was never able to be done before the municipalization movement that started with us in 2005.
So goes Georgia, so goes the nation. I've been saying that for some time now, Mr. Mayor. And where can we find and follow everything leading up to the November 4th election and what will be a very historic one, to say the least?
Well, the main thing is, we do have some local media who's covering it. Also, social media is a hot spot right now. I mean, there's a lot going on. You have to wade through a lot of debris to find the real nuggets of truth out there sometimes. But, there's a lot of information out there. And this is a very tight-knit community. People, the word of mouth still applies out here. But you can check, the social media of the candidates. And also our citizens. It's amazing what kind of good information I find just by reading some things that are posted by our citizens. So if you have to wade through a lot of information, but the truth is in there somewhere. You have to find it.
Well, and we hope as well through social media and the streaming here at Right Side Broadcasting Network that the good people of Sandy Springs, Georgia, and the surrounding area will be able to see their mayor in action. Rusty Paul, thank you for joining us from Sandy Springs, Georgia. Good luck in the race, sir. And thank you for joining us on The Voice of Reason.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed having a conversation.
Thank you to Mayor Rusty Paul of Sandy Springs, Georgia, for your commentary and analysis as the upcoming election is Tuesday, November 4th. Be sure to get there and vote early or on the day of in your respective neck of the woods as we look to the midterms in 2026. Today, we remember a couple of sad stories that have hit Alabama and specifically the Auburn area. Just the other day, this Huntsville, Alabama family lost their lives in a tragic plane crash but there's an Auburn connection. Mark Anderson, an experienced pilot, was flying in Montana with his two daughters, Lainey and Ellie, and their dog Stella. They were doing something they love, flying together. In fact, Lainey just graduated from Auburn University and was a flight instructor herself. Ellie, a high school senior, known as a great dancer, and her vivacious way, graceful, joyful. Sadly, they lost their lives in a terrible plane crash the other day in Montana. So our thoughts and prayers with them and the entire Auburn family and Alabama as a whole, because we do not know the time nor the hour nor the means in which we will return home to the Lord, even in situations when we're extraordinarily experienced in an adventurous hobby and profession such as flying. So our thoughts are with them at this very difficult moment. And 20 years ago, we lost Natalie Holloway to a horrific crime in Aruba. She was only a couple of years ahead in school than yours truly. And you only think about what could have been. She was set to go to the University of Alabama, wanted to become a medical doctor. And you think about this time in life, in your late 30s, early 40s, likely married with children. So we pray for her family, and we pray for those who are victims of senseless violence in our country, and especially as we've heard the stories more recently. And that's why we seek to be involved in civics, to get those elected that will protect the common good and to protect those who suffer at the hands of evildoers. So our thoughts and prayers with the Holloway family, a couple of connections here, not only in Auburn, but also throughout the whole of the great state of Alabama. Now, this day in history, Massachusetts Bay's charter is revoked. In October 23rd of 1684, English King Charles II revokes the Massachusetts Bay Colony Charter due to repeated violations of the charter's terms, including trading with other countries and running an illegal mint. So all of that build up to what would ultimately become the Revolution. The War of Jenkins' Ear back on October 23rd of 1739, British Prime Minister Robert Walpole reluctantly declares a war on Spain. In fact, on this date as well, in 1812, a coup was failed against French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. You may have heard his name in the past. And the Italo-Turkish War in 1911, the first aerial reconnaissance mission is flown by an Italian pilot over Turkish lines during the Italo-Turkish War on October 23rd of 1911. Prime Minister Bonar Law in 1922, conservative Andrew Bonar Law forms government in the United Kingdom, replacing David Lloyd George's Liberal government. And we've seen that over the years that things have gone back and forth. And in this day, October 23rd of 1932, radio comedy program The Fred Allen Show premieres to many fans across the country. Now, the King's third term in 1935, Mackenzie King is elected as Prime Minister of Canada for the third time. And in 1941, Walt Disney's animated Dumbo is released. You might have heard of that fine film. All of those days in history right today on October 23rd. Thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening. The voice of reason. It's punchlines, it's politics, it's sports and music. It's your community. It's your neck of the woods. It's the federal city and everything in between. It's always a joy to be with you. I'm Robert McNeily. Until next week, we will see you very soon. Be well and God bless.